try to understand someone like Ed Gein, the word that keeps coming up is monster. Not just in the documentaries, not just in the Netflix special, but in the way that people talk about him. And this is the first word that comes to mind when a story is too dark to even make sense of. A monster. Like that label somehow explains it all. But the truth is always more complicated. Ed Gein wasn't a creature that crawled out of a nightmare. He was a human being, shaped, warped, and broken by the world around him. Psychologists have tried to understand what lived inside his mind. Some point to severe psychosis, hallucinations, delusions, and a crooked sense of reality. Others focused on his necrophilic and gynephilia-type fixations. Essentially, a man whose connection to love, death, and identity completely unraveled. And maybe that's what makes this story so much harder to stomach. Because the word monster keeps us at a safe distance. But when you really start to look at him, you wonder how much of all of this horror came from feelings we've all experienced. Fear, loneliness, and love twisted into something unrecognizable. I'm Kayla, and this is Pretty Curious, so let's get into it. Ed was born August 27th, 1906 to George and Augusta Gein. Let's talk a little bit about these fine folks, shall we? His father, George Gein, grew up in the late 1800s in Wisconsin. He grew up poor, angry, and already halfway beaten by life. He'd worked as a tanner, as a carpenter, mainly in trades like this. He unfortunately failed at business, failed at farming, and failed at being the man his wife wanted him to be, which was no easy feat when you come to find out who Augusta Gein was. He once owned a small grocery store, but Augusta forced him to sell it so that they could move to an isolated farm away from the sinful townspeople. George was quiet and passive and defeated, often retreating into alcohol just to endure the constant criticism from Augusta. By 1940, George's body finally gave out. Years of alcohol and bitterness caught up with him, and he died quietly in the family's farmhouse. Ed Gein was just 34. After George's death, Ed and his older brother Henry stayed on the farm with their mother, Augusta, who told neighbors that it was a blessing. So as you can tell, she was all torn up. She continued to be very controlling over her two sons, which were the only thing she had left. And that dynamic of the three of them is what really sets the stage for what is to come later. When Augusta married George, she treated his drinking like proof of what she already knew, that sin was everywhere, men were weak, and that only she could keep her family pure and safe. So what she decided to do was move the whole family to a lonely farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. No electricity, no neighbors, no laughter, just morning farm chores and evening readings about eternal damnation before bed. You know, all that cozy stuff. She called all women, aside from herself of course, whores. She warned the brothers that desire was a trap and demanded their complete devotion. Ed learned early that to disappoint her was to disappoint God. However, born 5 years earlier than Ed, Henry Gein actually tried to live a normal life. As normal as you can be when your mom treats the 10 Commandments like the house rules. He worked odd jobs, kept to himself, but he wasn't completely under Augusta's spell. He'd started pushing back, saying things like maybe their mother wasn't perfect, and maybe Ed should stop worshipping her like the fourth member of the Holy Trinity. Which, you know, probably didn't go over great at family dinner. In 1944, the brothers were out burning brush on the property, but the fire spread faster than expected, and when it was finally out, Ed told police that he had lost sight of Henry. Hours later, the search party found him face down in a burned area of the farm. He had bruises on his head, but the coroner called it accidental asphyxiation. No real investigation, no autopsy. How he got those bruises on his head, we don't know, but there is speculation that maybe Ed was fed up with him not worshipping Augusta the way she deserved. Or maybe he just hit his head trying to get out of the fire. Whatever the case, Henry was gone, and Augusta's favorite son, the obedient one, was all she had left. There's one detail that gets left out of all the fire and brimstone stuff. Augusta wanted a daughter, which is kind of ironic considering she thought most women were tools of the devil. But Augusta's dream was to raise a perfect daughter in her own image. Someone she could mold, a daughter who'd stay loyal, obedient, and untouched. But instead, she got two sons. Henry she had lost. So she poured all that energy and that need to control into Ed. She dressed him, sheltered him, and made him believe that all women outside their home were wicked. But the irony in trying to protect him from evil women, she built the obsession that would define the rest of his life. And that obsession didn't stay inside his head for long. It started to seep out. Quiet at first, through strange habits, disturbing hobbies, and a fascination with anatomy that went far beyond curiosity. One night, when Ed was a teenager, Augusta caught him in the middle of some, we'll just say, self-reflection in the bathtub. And instead of reacting like a normal mom and shutting the door, she bursts in there like the Holy Spirit and grabs him by his you-know-what and screams at him that the only thing any son of hers would be worshipping is the Bible. And you wonder why the guy's so messed up. Could you imagine your mom walking in on you and telling you to get your hands off of what she called the curse of man? And now every time he felt even a flicker of desire, he would think like, oh no, mom's watching. And that guilt didn't just go away, it stuck around, and it grew claws. But his confusion started way earlier. When Ed was just 7, he watched his parents butcher a pig in their grocery shop. And the sound, the smell, the blood, instead of scaring him, it fascinated him. And it's unclear if Augusta ever noticed this, but it's chilling either way because you start to realize how young he really was when he started blending violence and desire. At school, Ed was a good student, the quiet, smart, obedient one. But he stuck out. Kids tore him apart for his lisp, his lazy eye, and his gentle voice. And then when he came home crying, his parents didn't comfort him, they punished him. While other kids his age were playing ball, going to dances, and sneaking out to meet girls, Ed was alone, usually with his nose in a book, because reading had become his only escape. He had no friends, no crushes, no normal teenage rebellion, and Augusta made sure of that. So she'd convinced him that women were evil, that desire was shameful, and that isolation was purity. By 8th grade, Ed dropped out completely, and he just sunk into the world that his mother had built for him. Augusta even made her sons swear to stay virgins until death, because nothing says family bonding like a lifetime vow of celibacy. When Ed was 37, Augusta had her first stroke, which honestly, who would have seen coming? Years of yelling about sin and hellfire and evil women. Yeah, total shocker that her body just gave out. All the things she used to force on him, he was now in control. And after she recovered, she didn't exactly come back softer. In true Augusta fashion, she doubled down, more sermons, more control, more venom for the world outside her home. When she suffered her second stroke, it was the final one. Augusta passed away December 29th, 1945. And when she did, Ed completely unraveled. He didn't just lose his mother, but his best friend, his moral compass, his entire reality. And when she passed, he boarded up her room and boarded all the memories away with it. People in town saw him as strange but harmless. The quiet guy who never swore, never drank, and always helped out. So he filled the silence in the only way he knew how, disappearing into a good book. He got really into pulp magazines, which were those cheap, sensational kind that mixed like war stories and horror and true crime. His favorites were the ones about cannibals, headhunters, and German medical experiments. He was especially interested in Ilse Koch, which is a German concentration commander's wife who allegedly made lampshades, gloves, and other home decor out of human skin. That's a crafty bitch. After enough lonely nights staring at those pages, the curiosity turned into action. Gein began visiting local graveyards and exhuming bodies of middle-aged women whose bodies he thought resembled his mother. He would take their skin and stitch it together, creating what he would call a woman's suit.
Oh my God, what the f-
He thought if he could step into her skin, he could bring her back. So really, he was trying to become his mother. And this is just a small glimpse of the atrocities that would go on inside that home. Eventually, graveyards were no longer enough to provide what he needed. At a small bar on the edge of town called Pine Grove Tavern, he met a bartender named Mary Hogan. Where Augusta preached fear and sin and punishment, Mary swore often, she laughed really loud, and she wore red lipstick like she didn't care what anyone thought. And to Ed, the defiance is what drew him to her. In December of 1954, Mary vanished. The bar was empty besides a pool of blood left behind and a .32 caliber casing. The cash register was untouched. People would whisper about a robbery gone wrong, but Ed would make unsettling comments like, "Oh, she's just out at the farm." And people thought that they were just these awkward jokes because he had a lack of social cues. What he meant by "she's out at my place" was that he had Mary with him in the same way that he had a world of half-living things secretly out at his farm. But the comfort bringing these things home brought him would never stay. And soon enough, he'd start spending more time out in town, lingering in shops, watching women who reminded him of his mother, and taking mental notes. And one morning in 1957, Ed came into the hardware shop asking her for antifreeze, and as always, was polite, smiled, and left. By evening, her son Frank had returned home from a hunting trip, and he came to find the shop empty, a trail of blood leading out the door, and the only clue left behind was his mother's receipt book, which read, "Antifreeze, Ed Gein," as the last entry. Sheriff Sclee and his deputies drove the 10 miles back to the farm, and nothing could prepare these poor police officers for what they were going to see next. Because when they walked in the barn, they saw something that appeared to be a deer carcass from hunting season, hanging from the rafters, when in fact it was no deer at all, and under closer investigation, it was Bernier Sporden's body, splayed and headless, hanging from the rafters by her ankles. They immediately thought deer, because you don't just assume that a dead body would be hanging from the beams like that. You just can't wrap your mind around it. It's traumatizing. But that was just the beginning of the horror, because they haven't even made it inside the house yet. Then as soon as you walk inside the house, it's completely hoarded. Boxes, jars, dust, newspapers, just cluttered every surface. And the air was stale and heavy with dust, and the smell in there. Dishes with rotting food on them, tools strewn all about. And then they kept going. Let me tell you the real interesting things that they found in this house. Okay, we'll start with the several lampshades and chairs refashioned with tan human hide. Human skin sewn into lamps and chairs. Because nothing says home sweet home like a lamp that smiles back at you. And if that doesn't do it for you, stacked in a cupboard, he had some unique and interesting looking bowls. Unique in the way that they were the top of human skulls, cut off and repurposed as food dishes. And for all intents and purposes, there was proof that he was actually eating out of these. And apparently he had a problem that all of his pants were too big, because he had to make a belt out of human nipples. Because what else are you gonna use to make a belt, am I right? It's not funny, but really, what was the thought process there? Well, I got all these nipples laying around, I might as well sew them onto a belt. Huh? He had an actual skin torso, with laces and everything, made out of real human skin from a chest. And I'm telling you, it just keeps going. Human lips made into curtain poles, fingernails stored in a box, and a pair of leggings made from skin. 10 skulls, or partial skulls, were found. Some of them were fashioned as wall decor. Some of them were posted to the top of his bedposts. 2 of these skulls belonged to women missing from the area. Bernice Warden's head was found in a burlap sack, and her heart was found in a plastic bag next to his oven. And the speculations are that he was going to eat her heart, although this is denied by him, but he was clearly fascinated by cannibalism, so I don't know what to believe. And I can't believe the words coming out of my mouth right now, because I kid you not, they found roughly a dozen masks, human faces, hanging on the wall, and he had admitted that he had several displayed as decorations, while a few reportedly fit over his face and he would wear them at times. And these strange items stuck out to investigators as they were walking around the house, not because they were concealed, but because they were just normally sat about throughout the house, as if it was just a part of his normal furnishings. The chair made with skin is sitting right there at the table. The bowl that's actually a skull is just in the cabinet. The skulls are on his bedposts. Like, he had normalized these things. And back in town, Ed was eating dinner at a friend's house when the police came to arrest him and asked him where Bernice Warden was. He didn't deny it, he didn't run, he just said, she's out at the farm. Anyways, at first he denied killing anyone. He said he had gone to the cemetery, that he sometimes brought things home. But when police officers quizzed him harder about Bernice Warden and Mary Hogan, he said, well, he explained sometimes he would fall into a sort of trance, as if he was walking in his sleep. And he described many nights digging in the frozen ground, and just said he wouldn't remember what he had done until he'd woken up and found what he brought home. He spoke about his mother as though she were still alive, and spoke of how he missed her, her voice, her scoldings, and how he only wanted to feel close to her again. When the police asked him about the objects that they found in the house, he had described the work he had done as if it were just home repairs. Just clinical and detached in his language. Even to the point where they asked him why he didn't have any romantic relations with the bodies that he dug up, and he gave a plain and simple answer.
They smell to that.
And that was that on that. And the word spread through Wisconsin like wildfire. A once quiet farming town became the epicenter for every reporter in the area to run to go document this grotesque nightmare and go see his house. Locals, the ones who had waved at Ed for years, refused to believe it at first. He was the one who fixed their fences, babysat their children, and brought neighbors venison. I don't know how much I would trust that venison, though. See if I can do the slip liner while doing this. In court, Ed sat motionless while the judge asked him what he pled to all of his charges. Desecration, robbery, theft, murder, and all he did was just nod, saying that he understood the charges with his hands folded in his lap. He never asked for mercy, but when doctors examined him, they decided that he was schizophrenic, psychotic, and had necrophilic impulses. He was sent to Central State Hospital for the criminally insane. And he spent the rest of his life reading, gardening, helping in the kitchen, and staff said he was polite, even gentle, as if the monster stayed locked in Plainfield alongside the farmhouse that was later burned to the ground by local townspeople who wanted to erase the memory. And what did we learn? The murder cells. So out of this story, we got Psycho, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Silence of the Lambs, and Ed Gein became the blueprint. The soft-spoken man next door with something unspeakable hiding in his house. AKA something straight out of a nightmare. In the end, the story isn't about Ed Gein. It's about Mary Hogan and Bernice Worden. Because they were two lovely women living ordinary lives, and they didn't deserve the horror that they got wrapped up in. That's what makes these stories kind of stick with me, because I always wonder what causes one person to grieve the loss of their mother and another person to go digging up bodies and trying on faces. Maybe we'll never know. But remembering their memory seems to be the only part of this case that makes any sense, so I would like to do that. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you've made it this far, then congratulations! You're as weird and as curious as I am. I started pretty curious because I wanted a place to put in all of my weird little stories that I go down rabbit holes about, the little corners of the internet I found myself in, and the thoughts that go through my head at 2 a.m. Everything from the beautiful to the bizarre, so if you're with all that, go ahead and follow the channel and I'll be posting weekly. So don't go get normal on me now. Stay curious.